Have you ever struggled to get your voice heard in a room full of men and then felt frustrated at the end of a meeting because you either couldn't get your point across or someone else shared it? Or even worse, that the wrong decision was made at a meeting because you could share your voice? In this video, we deal with 10 tips that you can use to help you overcome that situation. Tip number 1. Prepare your point in advance so that you're clear about what you're trying to achieve and the point that you're trying to make. Tip number 2. Practice what you want to say outside of the meeting. I find it's really helpful to prepare your first few lines about what you want to say to make sure that they flow easily and avoid the awkward moment where you open your mouth, you stumble, you mumble, or worse, a crackly voice comes out. If you're comfortable with the first few points you're going to make, it's going to make the whole conversation a lot easier. Tip number 3. Be succinct as you possibly can. Sometimes it's helpful to think about what you want to say as a tweet or a haiku. It means that you're concise, you're succinct, and you get to the point. That means you can avoid rambling on or a general kind of wandering of your thoughts when you're trying to get a really clear point across in a meeting. Tip number 4, be confident in your own voice. Sometimes the self-doubt in our head may question whether or not we want to raise a point in a meeting. To help manage this, I consider 2 things. Firstly, do I have skills or expertise in this area that perhaps no one else in the room does? Or can I offer a different viewpoint from the one that's being put forward? If the answer is yes to either of those questions, then I go ahead, speak up and make my point. Tip number 5, ask a question. Getting your voice heard is just like any other muscle, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you will be doing. So often I ask a question on someone else's section or make a comment to establish my voice in the room and get me used to interjecting into the conversation. Then later, when I want to make a more serious point or raise an issue, I've already established myself in the room and my voice is more easily heard. Tip number 6, remember to relax and breathe. Sometimes when we know we've got a big issue to raise or an important point to make, we can start to tense up. It's important to remember to take a breath, relax, and if it's appropriate, to smile as you start to talk. That will allow others to warm to you and also you to relax into what you need to say and get your point across effectively. Tip number 7, body language. Use body language and visual cues to your advantage. If the meeting's in a physical setting, this can include sitting up straighter in your chair, using your pen or other implement to signal you want to be brought into the meeting, or catching the eye line of the person who's leading the conversation. If the meeting's in a virtual setting, you can use the virtual hand up button or chat function to make your point or signal that you want to be brought into the conversation. Tip number 8, speak slowly. Sometimes, especially if we've been waiting to get into a conversation, we may canter through our thoughts and speak really quickly. However, it's much more impactful if you slow down your speech and match the pace of the room to make sure your point is heard and recognised by those who are listening. 9, learn from others. If you're in a meeting and you see someone who does this particularly well, study what they do. Sometimes modelling the behaviour of others and learning their lessons is a really powerful tool. Tip 10, find an ally. If you're going into a meeting where perhaps it's more difficult to get your point across or you're worried that you won't be able to do that, seek an ally before the meeting. Speak to them and let them know that you do want to be brought into the conversation or you have a view that needs to be expressed. They may be able to circle the conversation back round to you or at least signal that you need to be brought in. Sometimes a pincer movement is much more effective. Failing all of those, you can stand on your chair and scream at the top of your voice. However, that's a one-time trick and I wouldn't recommend it. So that's been 10 tips to help you get your voice heard in meetings and be more effective. I'd love to hear your comments below about how this has helped or what you'd like to hear from the channel in the future. Check out the rest of my channel for other tips, tricks and hacks to help you navigate your career.